You wake before the sun does. The bells haven't rung yet, but your body has learned the rhythm of labor. The wooden floor beneath your cot creaks as you rise quietly, careful not to wake the other girls. 5 to a room barely large enough for two, sharing a single cracked basin and a sliver of soap. The air is still damp from the night, and your fingers ache from yesterday's scrubbing. It's only 5:15 a.m. You're a chambermaid at the Adams House Hotel in Boston, one of the finest establishments in the city. The kind of place where men dine in cravats, women glide in silk, and no one notices the ones who make the elegance possible. This is your life, invisible, exacting, and endlessly repetitive. The day begins with a broom and ends with a bucket. In between, there is an avalanche of linen, brass to polish, slops to empty, and chamber pots, dozens of them, each one a reminder that glamour smells no different from poverty once the lid is lifted. The world behind the door. The guests never see what happens after they leave their rooms, but you do. Each room is its own battlefield. Sheets are soaked in sweat, some in worse. A child's fever left the mattress soaked last night in room 203. You're instructed to scrub it with vinegar and sun it by the service stairwell. There's no talk of replacing it. Mattresses are expensive, and bleach hasn't been invented yet. Then there's the brass. Doorknobs, bed frames, curtain rods, all must gleam. If they don't, Mrs. Pritchard, the housekeeper, will take a white glove to it and find fault. She always does. It is the first thing a guest sees, she says. If it tarnishes, so does the reputation of this house. But nothing tarnishes faster than your hands. After only a year on the job, yours are lined like an old woman. Red, raw, often cracked until they bleed. Lye and hot water do that. You wear gloves if you're lucky. If another girl hasn't taken yours by mistake. The chamber pot routine. It is the worst part of the job. Every room contains a ceramic pot tucked neatly under the bed or inside a commode. It's your job to empty it, scrub it, and return it without spilling a drop. If you spill, it's not just embarrassment, it's a reprimand or worse. You hold your breath. Some guests are discreet, others are not. You learn quickly that wealth does not equal dignity. One day, a traveling actor left a note for you in his pot. You deserve better than this, but I suppose we all do. You didn't tell anyone. You folded it and tucked it into your apron pocket, and for reasons you still don't fully understand, you've kept it ever since. Soap laundry day, every day. Most assume laundry happens once a week. For you, it's constant. The washing is never-ending. Sheets, towels, dresses, undergarments. The maid's laundry room sits behind the kitchen where the fires never go out. There, you boil water in large copper pots and stir the garments with wooden paddles, your face flushed from steam and smoke. Soap is handmade, thick and harsh. It burns the eyes. Rinsing requires cold water, and there are no gloves for this part. By the end of your shift, your dress is soaked, your skin blotched pink, and your feet are stiff in their worn shoes. And yet, this is not the worst job in the hotel. The scullery maids who work in the basement kitchens envy your daylight. You, in turn, envy the parlor maids who serve tea in gloves and speak to guests directly. Hierarchies exist even among the invisible. Scroll rules of silence. You are not allowed to speak to guests unless spoken to. You are not allowed to make noise, even when scrubbing floors or changing sheets. Laughter is frowned upon. If someone complains of a noise on the upper floor, Mrs. Pritchard will conduct a full investigation. Silence becomes your second skin. You learn to carry heavy things quietly, to tiptoe while carrying metal buckets, and to cry without sound. You begin to wonder if your voice still belongs to you, or if it's just another tool owned by the hotel. Fork a meal you earned but didn't choose. Breakfast comes late for you after all the guests have eaten. You eat standing up behind the kitchen, often cold by the time you get there. A hard biscuit, some porridge, and weak tea. If there's a banquet tonight, you'll get better scraps, but you'll pay for them with your back. One Sunday, a new girl asked the cook for butter. He laughed in her face. "Ask God for mercy before you ask me for butter." She cried she didn't last the week. Candle before electricity, before rest. The last room is serviced by lamplight. Electricity hasn't reached most hotels yet, so you carry an oil lamp. You're not to leave smudges on the globe, and you must trim the wick to avoid smoke. You do this with trembling hands. It's been 14 hours since your shift began. There's a blood stain on your sleeve from a cut you got wringing out a rusted pail. Your shoulders sag. Your neck aches. As you place the lamp down on the mantelpiece of room 310, you glimpse yourself in the mirror. You barely recognize the woman there. You look 40, though you are 19. Outside, snow is falling. Inside, the guest's fire crackles merrily. You are not permitted to use it. You close the door, step into the dark hallway, and descend the servants' stairs. Unresolved thought. How did these women endure decades of labor in silence, when even one day feels eternal? Behind the curtains of class. As you rise for another endless day, your back stiff from a cot that never forgives, you start to realize something. You live in a different Boston than the guests above you. Their world is velvet-lined and candlelit. Yours is coal-dusted and cold. The difference is not just money, it's silence, service, and the expectation that your suffering should remain unseen. The Adams House Hotel stands proudly in the center of the city, catering to wealthy merchants, politicians, and socialites. But behind its shining brass door handles and polished marble floors is a machine run by girls like you, maids from Irish families, black women who fled the South, or orphaned daughters too poor to marry. You were never meant to be noticed. If you do your job well, no one sees you. If you make a mistake, everyone does. Receipt the ledger of shame. Pay is listed in a logbook kept in Mrs. Pritchard's office, and it's always the same, $6 a month. No tips allowed, unless slipped discreetly, and even then it's risky. Some girls hide their coins in their shoes or inside hems sewn into their aprons. One girl was caught hiding a gold coin in her corset and was dismissed by the end of the day. No reference, no final pay. You never saw her again. The system is designed to keep you in place. Room, board, and uniform are deducted from your wage, and what's left barely covers the cost of a warm shawl or extra soap. You're not building a future here. You're surviving in the present. You once dreamed of becoming a seamstress. Now you mend uniforms for others. Mantelpiece time as a tool of control. Your days are measured in bells. A bell in the service corridor chimes when a guest needs something. A different bell signals shift changes. Another rings when it's time for inspection. The bells dictate your movements with mechanical precision. But unlike machines, you're expected to smile, even when exhausted. You're expected to remember which guest likes rose water, which prefers the window open, and which refuses to have a woman enter his room if she isn't white. It's 1876. Slavery is abolished, but racism is not. 2 of the black maids are assigned to back rooms only. They're not to appear in parlors. Guests might not approve, Mrs. Pritchard once muttered. You're Irish. You face your own prejudice, but at least you're allowed upstairs. Leaf fluttering in wind, the secret rebellions. Not all of you accept it quietly. Maureen, the head laundry maid, taught you to scald sheets too hot when a guest was cruel. Let them wonder why their pillow smells faintly of ash. Another maid leaves tiny pinpricks in the hems of silk curtains after being scolded by a guest. Invisible revenge, she calls it. You write letters you never send. You keep a journal hidden behind a loose floorboard. You sometimes swap names with another girl to confuse Mrs. Pritchard's roster, just to reclaim a sliver of control. Rebellion doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it looks like surviving without permission. The view you're not allowed to enjoy. There's a window at the far end of the 4th floor, a small, square opening just beyond the linen closet. You're not supposed to linger there. It overlooks the main street where the carriages pass and newsboys shout headlines. Once, after a particularly hard day, you stood there for a whole minute and watched a couple walk past. He in a top hat, she in a bustle so wide it looked like a boat. You imagined being her for a moment. You imagined what it might feel like to walk into this hotel from the front, rather than the servant's entrance in the alley. But daydreams are dangerous in a place like this. They leave you longing. Locked what gets locked away. Secrets abound in the hotel and you learn to keep them. A guest's mistress in room 305. A stolen pocket watch found beneath the floorboards. A pregnant maid who vanished after her belly began to show. No one asks questions. They just replace her. The walls whisper and you learn not to listen. Because truth doesn't matter here, perception does. Sometimes you wonder if the hotel has absorbed you. If your voice and identity are now part of its old wooden bones. You clean, scrub, and polish the same places day after day, and yet nothing changes except your face in the mirror. Package room 211, the girl who disappeared. It was last winter when Clara arrived, a small girl with clever hands and a quiet strength. She could fold a sheet into perfect thirds with her eyes closed. She never complained, never cried. One day she didn't show up for breakfast. Her cot was empty, the sheets neatly folded. Mrs. Pritchard said she left without notice. But her shoes were still under the bed. You've never stopped wondering what happened. Girls don't just vanish, not unless they're made to. In room 211, there's a creak in the floorboard. You avoid stepping on it. You think of Clara every time. Unresolved thought. What does it mean to disappear without ever being seen in the first place? A life measured in stitches and steam. It's late again. The final fire has been stoked and the last chamber pot emptied. You wipe your hands on your apron and glance at the clock above the kitchen door. It's almost midnight. Outside, the snow falls softly, coating the gaslit streets of Boston in silence. Inside the hotel, elegance sleeps soundly, but you and the other maids remain awake, still folding, still scrubbing, still existing just out of sight. What they don't see is what you carry. Not just laundry, but exhaustion, grief, the slow erosion of dreams. Books, the education you were denied. Your schooling ended when your father fell ill. There was no money for books, only for rent and food, barely. You were 12 when you first took up a mop, 15 when you started at the hotel. Now you're 19, but time here moves differently. It folds in on itself like linen. You try to read when you can. One of the kitchen boys smuggled in an old book of poetry. You keep it hidden behind a loose brick in the laundry wall. You read by moonlight. You've memorized lines that remind you that beauty exists outside these walls, even if it's only found in words. You've taught 3 other maids how to read using scraps of newspaper and menus tossed out by the kitchen. It's a small rebellion, but it matters. Because knowledge, like silence, accumulates. Thread a needle, a scarf. Many of you learn to sew, not just because it's part of the job, but because it's a survival skill. Mending your uniform means avoiding a fine. Fixing another girl's torn sleeve means a favor owed. A stitch in time can prevent punishment. But some scars can't be mended. There's a burn on your wrist from when you spilled boiling lye water. The mark never faded. There's a welt on your calf from slipping on a wet stair and being told it was your fault. You've begun to catalog these marks not in ink but in memory. Each one a story of something endured, not glorious, not heroic, just real. Spoon, the silver spoon that wasn't yours. One morning, the hotel hosted a senator from Washington. You were assigned to clean his suite. While dusting his dresser, you found a silver spoon lying next to a crumpled cufflink. It was ornate, engraved, and polished so brightly you could see your own face in it. For a moment, you held it in your palm. The thought occurred to you, not theft, not rebellion, just wonder. How many mouths has this spoon fed? How many parties? How many lives so far removed from your own had touched this one object? You placed it gently back, but you remember how heavy it felt. Not in weight, in meaning. Open book, the journal you're still writing. You keep a journal, tiny, leather-bound, worn at the corners. You write in it every night, even if it's just a sentence. Burned my finger today, again. New girl cried in the laundry. Guest in 204 complimented the sheets, told no one. Some nights you write your dreams, to have a home of your own, to run a small laundry with fair wages, to be seen. You don't know if you'll ever leave this job, but you write as if you might. As if the words will one day lead you out of the back door and into a better life. Words are the only thing in this place that belong to you. Derelict the maids who stayed. Some never leave. They become head maids, then housekeepers. Their backs bow, their hair grays. They carry ledgers instead of linens, but they are still bound to the system. Mrs. Pritchard was once like you. She never speaks of it, but you've seen the photograph in her drawer, her younger self standing with a mop, the same apron, the same tired eyes. You wonder if she once wrote in a journal too. You wonder when she stopped. Waxing crescent moon the night Clara came back. It happened quietly. 3 months after she vanished, Clara appeared at the rear entrance, thin as a twig, carrying nothing but a folded apron. She said nothing, just handed it to Mrs. Pritchard and left. No one stopped her. No one asked where she'd been. That night, the girls whispered about whether she'd run away, whether she'd lost a child, whether she'd been sent to an asylum and escaped. You didn't speculate. You just stood in the hallway, staring at the apron on the hook. For the first time, you realized what power silence holds, and how sometimes it's the only weapon you have. Candle final reflection. No statue will be built for the women who cleaned the chamber pots of Boston's finest hotels. No book will immortalize their names, but they existed, bruised, brilliant, buried under linen, and their work held up the glittering world above. History rarely records them, but they were there. So tonight, as you drift off to sleep, remember, the world was not only built by kings and generals, it was stitched together by hands like theirs. Cold dust and lace, the hidden work of Victorian housekeepers. The woman who knew every key. You are the first to rise and the last to sleep. You hold no title beyond housekeeper, yet every corridor bends around your decisions. You carry no weapons but your tools, ledgers, keys, and silence. Command a building of 24 rooms, 6 fireplaces, 14 staff members, and nearly 100 secrets. This is your domain, a Victorian estate on the edge of a sooty London borough, owned by a banking family too busy with balls and business to notice the smooth functioning of their household. But they notice when the sugar is missing. They notice when the fireplace smokes. And when something goes wrong, they don't blame the cook. They call for you. You are Mrs. Hargrove, housekeeper of the Langford estate, and you're very, very good at your job. Hold the key ring of power. Your keys don't just open doors, they signal who you are. The butler holds the wine cellar and study keys. The valet holds the master's wardrobe, but only you possess the master ring, an iron arc of 22 labeled keys. You unlock the linen closet, the pantry, the scullery, the attic trunks, the servants' hall cabinets, and most importantly, the safe where wages are stored. Young maids think you must be rich. You are not. You are simply organized. You've memorized every drawer, shelf, and lockbox in the house. You know exactly how many silver teaspoons exist in this home. When one goes missing, you know who last polished them and who stood near the dining table. Power in this house isn't about noise, it's about knowledge. And no one knows more than you. The illusion of refinement. To guests, the Langford estate is elegance incarnate. Velvet chairs, chandeliers that mimic the stars, a dining table set with napkins folded like swans. They don't know the smell of scorched milk that seeps up from the scullery when the milkmaid nods off. They don't hear the scuffling in the walls when the rats return to the pantry's corners. They don't see you directing the staff like a silent orchestra from the edges of the drawing room. Behind every silk curtain is a patch hastily sewn. Behind every lace doily is a sweat-stained arm that placed it there. Your job is to maintain the illusion that the house is perfect, even when the truth is that it's rotting quietly from the inside. Fire coal as currency. Every room must be heated. In the Victorian era, that means coal, expensive, dirty, and essential. Coal dust coats the house like fog. It finds its way into skirts, cuffs, and lungs. The master expects the drawing room fire to be lit before he rises. The mistress wants her sitting room warm enough to embroider. Guests expect heat without smoke. But coal is rationed. You track every sack delivered. You know which maids overuse it, which fireplaces need repairs, and which chimney flues are one ash fall from disaster. Sometimes you order ashes to be sifted, searching for unburned coal. The servants groan, but you persist. Waste is theft in your eyes. Waste is weakness. And you are neither wasteful nor weak. Clipboard the schedule of the invisible. At exactly 4:15 a.m., the scullery maid begins her day. By 5:00, the kitchen is warm. At 6:00, the cook begins preparations. At 6:45, the maids must be dressed and ready. You begin your rounds at 7:00. You don't wake people up. You check that they've woken themselves. You walk silently. You observe everything. A wrinkled apron, an unswept stair, a bed made hastily. Each error is logged mentally, then addressed with terrifying calm. You keep a journal in your desk drawer, not of your feelings, but of facts. Which servant has a limp? Which guest is likely to sneak brandy into their tea? Which child keeps putting beetles in the sugar jar? Your mind is an archive, and you guard it fiercely. Thread-stitching reputation. The mistress's gowns must always be perfect, so you supervise the mending, a tear in a hem. It must be invisible, a button missing, replaced by noon. No seamstress outside the house is trusted. The Langfords don't like the drama of shop gossip. What they don't know is that their household has its own rumors. You hear everything. The underfootman sneaking scraps to his cousin. The lady's maid crying in the storage closet after being scolded. The kitchen maid who broke a vase and blamed the wind. You say nothing unless it affects the house. That is your compass. Loyalty, not affection. Efficiency, not emotion. This is how you survived 15 years in service. This is how you rose from scullery girl to housekeeper. Unresolved thought. What happens when the one who holds every key realizes she has no door of her own to unlock? The weight of the ledgers. At first glance, the house appears calm. Polished floors, trimmed hedges, a vase of fresh peonies by the stairway. But the real heartbeat of the Langford estate is not in the drawing room, it's in your ledgers. You open them every morning, seated at the small roll-top desk in the corner of your room. Ink stains mark the pages. Lines, margins, columns, all perfectly aligned. The ledgers document everything. How many bars of soap were used? How many spoons were polished? How many eggs were cracked? It is a history written not in names but in numbers. No one reads them but you. Yet without them, the house would collapse into chaos. Open book, the mathematics of labor. 14 servants, 24 rooms, dozens of tasks every hour. You don't rely on guesswork, you assign everything with purpose. Ellen, the youngest maid, is fast but careless. She's given the drawing room rugs, less fragile than fine china. Margaret is methodical. She gets the guest bedrooms. Thomas, the footman, is stronger than he is smart. You have him move coal but not wine. There's no room for indulgence in your calculations. If someone falls ill, you adjust the chart. If a guest arrives unannounced, you rewrite the schedule on the spot. You once worked for a family who didn't use ledgers. Their house burned down. You took the lesson seriously. Now, even your thoughts feel structured like a grid. Magnifying glass tilted left when nothing happens, because you made it so. The mistress smiles when she walks into a clean room. The master nods when the tea arrives exactly on time. They think it all just works. That's your success. Disaster avoided is not dramatic. A rat caught before it reaches the pantry. A cracked tile replaced before the guest arrives. A sick maid quietly replaced in the breakfast rota. You orchestrate dozens of these small interventions daily. The better you are, the less you are seen. There's a strange kind of invisibility in excellence. You learned that from your mother, who cleaned laundry for 3 households and never once received thanks. Soap Sunday and the illusion of rest. Sunday is rest day, in name only. Servants wear slightly better clothing. A roast replaces boiled cabbage. Some get to walk to church. But the house still runs. Linens still need folding. A child still spills jam on the tablecloth. You remain behind, ensuring nothing falls apart. Sometimes a guest stays late after church and compliments the staff. The roast was marvelous, they'll say, or the fireplace was just the right warmth. The credit will go to cook or the butler. You nod politely. Later that night in your journal you'll write, "They noticed, but not who did it." And still you'll wake at dawn tomorrow. You always do. Bed the bed with too many pillows. Guests expect beds like clouds, mattresses stuffed with goose feathers, sheets crisp and white, and above all pillows, 4, sometimes 6, arranged in precise formation. Most guests ruin them in minutes, but that doesn't change the expectation. One evening, you personally refluffed a pillow in the guest wing because the new maid hadn't been thorough. As you smoothed the final corner, the guest, a foreign diplomat, walked in. "Ah, the housekeeper herself," he laughed. "Do you often do your maid's work?" You smiled, "Only when it's necessary." He handed you a coin. You refused it, not out of pride but policy. He didn't understand. But this house runs on quiet standards, not praise. Speech ballooned the conversation that never happens. You have thoughts, opinions. You read the newspaper and follow politics, but you never speak them aloud, not here. Your voice only exists to give orders or answer questions. Once a guest asked about the servants' wing being too cold. You answered honestly. The walls weren't insulated during the last renovation. She blinked. How do you know that? You almost laughed. You know everything, but that wasn't the answer she wanted. So now you offer only polite observations. You speak with precision and caution. You know how easily one phrase can be misunderstood by the upper class, and how quickly a lifetime of service can be dismissed by a single rumor. Unresolved thought. What does it cost a woman to be perfect at a job that values her silence more than herself? The legacy of an unnamed woman. The house is still. A guest has just departed, and with him a dozen linen changes, 2 lost buttons, a spilled decanter, and a crushed bouquet no one mentions. But everything is once again in order. No one saw the chaos. That's the point. You sit down at your desk as dusk creeps over the London skyline, casting long shadows across the estate. You open your ledger to the blank line beneath today's date. Nothing went wrong, which means everything went right. You do not smile. You do not rest. You simply dip your pen in ink and write down the perfection as if it were a number. Because in this job, success isn't a celebration, it's an expectation. The mirror at the end of the hall. There is a mirror that hangs at the back end of the 3rd floor corridor. It's old, warped in the middle, slightly tarnished, and hung just low enough that you always see your full reflection when you pass. You don't look into it often, but tonight you pause. You see a woman in a gray uniform, neat hair pulled into a tight bun, her face lined but not worn out. Her eyes are alert, not cold. You've lived so long under discipline that you almost forgot you're human beneath it. You wonder how others see you. To the young maids, you're terrifying. To the butler, you're competition. To the mistress, you're useful. To the master, you're furniture. To yourself, still unknown. Package the box you keep hidden. Beneath the floorboard in your room is a box. Inside it, a few things no one else knows about. A photograph of your younger sister who died in the cholera outbreak. A letter from a man you once planned to marry, before he left for Canada and never returned. And a small clipping from a newspaper with an advertisement for a school for girls in Devon. You once considered leaving, becoming a teacher, starting again. But you stayed, for reasons that made sense at the time. Now, the box is more of a reminder than a plan, a token of the lives you might have lived. You haven't opened it in years, but tonight you do. You run your fingers along the photograph's worn edge. You whisper her name. For a moment, you're not the housekeeper. You're just a sister. Luggage the girl who asked to leave. Her name was Clara, not the same Clara from Boston, but another. Young, red-haired, only 16. She approached you last winter, voice shaking. "Mrs. Hargrove," she said, "I want to leave service. I'd like to work in a bookshop." You didn't scold her. You simply asked, "Do you read?" She blushed, then nodded. "Every night, even when I shouldn't." You remembered yourself at 16. You remembered hiding under your covers with candlelight and a borrowed pamphlet on geography. You gave her a reference letter the next morning. She left 2 weeks later, sent you a postcard months after. "Thank you. I dust shelves now instead of tables. but I do it standing straighter. You've kept it in your desk ever since. Not every housekeeper would have done that, but you're not every housekeeper. The silver you guard. On paper, you oversee cutlery and linen. In practice, you guard the family's legacy. Theft is always a threat, by staff, by strangers, sometimes even by the family themselves. You once caught the master's cousin slipping a spoon into his coat. You confronted him with silence, just stood in the hall blocking his exit. He blushed, returned it, and said nothing. Neither did you. That's the trick. Sometimes silence speaks louder than scandal. The family never knew, but they trusted you more after that, even if they didn't know why. You earned that trust without ever being invited to dine with them. End arrow the night you almost walked away. 5 years ago, you packed your bag. You had a little money saved, enough to go to Yorkshire, where a cousin offered you a cottage and freedom. You sat on your bed, laces untied, bag by your feet. Then the maid burst in crying. Margaret, her father had died. She needed time. The staff panicked. The cook grew ill. The linen delivery was late. You unpacked your bag. That's what it means to be the keystone. When you leave, everything shifts. And you couldn't bear to leave it broken. So you stayed. You always stay. Candle final reflection. History rarely remembers housekeepers. No monuments stand in their honor. No history books quote their ledgers. But they held households together through births, deaths, war, recession, and scandal. And like the lace they managed so delicately, their work was intricate, essential, and mostly unseen. You were one of them. You mattered, even if the world never said so aloud. Linen, lye, and blisters, the painful process of 19th century laundry. The boil room awakens. It begins before sunrise with a creak, a hiss, and the thick scent of wet cloth and lye. You are already sweating before dawn. The air is heavy, thick with moisture. The copper cauldron is half full, the fire beneath it crackling like impatient fingers. You reach for the wooden paddle, blistered hands already stinging. You are a laundress in 1882, working for the Eldridge boarding house on the edge of Cincinnati's industrial quarter. You do not wear a uniform. You wear the same brown dress every day, sleeves rolled, skirt soaked, hem fraying. You are not seen by guests. You are not spoken of. But every bedsheet, towel, apron, and tablecloth they touch has passed through your hands. You don't wash clothing. You scrub memories from fabric, and you do it with boiling water, caustic soap, and a strength most would never imagine. Fire the workday starts with boiling water. At 4:30 a.m., the fire must be lit beneath the copper wash kettle. By 5:00, the first load should be boiling. If it isn't, your day is already behind. Water is hauled by bucket from the pump, 40 pounds at a time, 2 for each boil. The wash house is separate from the main house, built of rough wood, open to the wind in winter and suffocating in summer. There is no insulation. Your knuckles turn blue in February. Your cheeks blister in July. The process is precise. First a soak, then a boil with lye soap, then rinsing twice, then scrubbing, then wringing, then hanging or laying across hedges if line space is short. Each step has to be followed. One slip and the entire load is ruined. You've seen girls collapse by noon. You've seen hands so raw they looked flayed. You work past pain because laundry doesn't wait. Soap, what is lye soap, and why does it burn? You make your own soap. Lye is made from wood, ash, and water, boiled with fat until it sizzles into a thick, pale paste. It eats through dirt, but it also eats through skin. You have burns to prove it. The bars are cut unevenly and stored in cloth. You keep the strong bars for linens and the weaker ones for guest clothing. There is no such thing as gentle soap here, only different degrees of harshness. The soap smells like smoke and fat. After a while, you stop noticing. After a while, you stop noticing a lot of things. Flexed biceps scrubbing boards and wooden paddles. Each item must be scrubbed by hand, pressed hard against a corrugated board or stirred with a paddle in a boiling vat. Sweat drips down your nose. Your arms ache. You're not allowed to stop, not until the pile is gone. Scrubbing boards are made of tin and wood. They cut into the fabric and into you. Your wrists swell, your back knots. Every motion is mechanical. Push, pull, twist, repeat. Some girls hum to keep the rhythm. Some weep. Some say nothing at all. You've learned to count silently, not for the number of garments, but for the seconds between pain and numbness. Wind the drying game. There are never enough lines. When it rains, everything slows. Damp linens must be re-rinsed. Mildew is the enemy. You sniff every sheet before folding it. If there's the faintest sourness, back it goes. You learn to predict the weather better than most farmers. You memorize the way the air feels before a storm. You pray for wind, curse the fog. Sometimes, when the sun hits just right, you pause to watch the steam rise from a clean sheet. It looks like a ghost. You wonder how something so clean can still feel so heavy in your arms. Basket, not just laundry, social hierarchy in a basket. You don't wash all clothes equally. The master's collar is boiled in fresh water. The chambermaid's apron, rinsed in reused water. Undergarments are done last, never in the same vat as napkins or towels. Stains from blood, wine, or ink are treated with vinegar or salt. Some never come out. There is an unspoken rule. The finer the cloth, the more gently you treat it. But your own rags, they go in last if there's water left. Sometimes there is. Unresolved thought. How much of a woman can be worn away in boiling water before the world notices what she lost? Hands that do heal. The skin on your fingers splits by Thursday. You bandage them with old cloth and keep working. There is no sick day in the wash house. There is only the next load, the next fire, the next basket of soiled linens. You dream of hot water at night, not for tea, but to boil another set of napkins. The pain becomes part of the rhythm. You no longer expect comfort. You only expect to endure. Hand a body changed by labor. The laundry reshapes you. Your arms grow thick with muscle, your back stiff with strain. You walk with a slight limp, one leg always more sore than the other from the pedal of the wringer. Your hands no longer look like a young woman. They are leathered, cracked, bleached by lie and sun. The nails bend, the joints swell. Some nights you can't straighten your fingers. There are men who wouldn't shake your hand, not because they see dirt, but because they see strength. And in their world, that's not what women are supposed to carry. You carry it anyway. Safety pin stains that tell stories. You've learned to read stains like maps. Wine means a celebration. Ink means a letter or a lie. Blood is often illness, or childbirth, or something not spoken of. Once you found soot mixed with perfume and grease on a silk bodice, a servant's garment, but not worn while serving. You knew better than to ask. Laundry tells the truth others hide. Each mark is a message. Each fabric a confession. And your job is to cleanse it, not judge it. But still, you wonder sometimes what the master's coat brushed against last night, or why the housekeeper's sleeves were torn, or who broke the glass that left cuts along the hem of a bedsheet. You scrub the evidence, but you remember it all. The girl who washed her way out. Her name was Elsie, 17, light on her feet even in the wash house. She saved every penny, stitched lace in secret to sell in the market on Sundays. She never complained, never wasted soap, always asked to clean the nicest linens because she said, "I want to feel what it's like to touch softness every day." One day, she left without warning. She'd taken her savings, bought a train ticket, and written you a note on wax paper. "Thank you for teaching me more than soap. I'm clean now, in more ways than one." You still have it. Sometimes you hold it and wonder what she's scrubbing now, if anything at all. Counterclockwise arrows button, the endless cycle. Monday is boiling, Tuesday is scrubbing, Wednesday is starching, Thursday is pressing, Friday is folding, Saturday is mending, Sunday is sorting. Then it begins again. Even time feels laundered, wrung dry, ironed flat, folded into predictable piles. You once overheard a guest say, "I wish I lived a simpler life." You laughed quietly, wringing out a blanket with your torn palms. Simple doesn't mean easy. Simple doesn't mean painless. You don't speak of that, because no one asks the laundress what her life is like. They only notice if a shirt is still damp. Unresolved thought. If your only mark on history is folded into someone else's sleeve, did you ever truly leave one at all? The weight of clean things. It's late. The fires have dimmed. The last line of laundry hangs limp in the cool night air. A few clothespins creak in the wind. You sit on the wooden bench outside the wash house, skirt damp, arms sore, and eyelids heavy. Tomorrow you'll rise before the sun again. But for now, there is a moment of stillness. And in that silence, you allow yourself a thought rarely entertained. What would it feel like to be clean without bleeding for it? Basket the fold that must be perfect. Folding is the final step. It sounds simple, it is. Each corner must meet. Each hem must lie flat. Napkins folded into thirds. Towels into squares. Sheets into rolls, tied with ribbon for the guest rooms, string for the servants, and nothing at all for your own bedding. If you fold with tired hands, the mistress will notice. If a guest sees a wrinkle, the housekeeper will be blamed. and she in turn will blame you. So you fold with care, even when your hands tremble, because folded linen is the last impression of your work. It is the only part they ever touch. And it must whisper, someone cared even if they never knew who. Firecracker when the iron burned through the cloth. It was a summer day, too hot for pressing. The stove that heated the flat irons glowed red. You lost track of time. One extra second and the sleeve was ruined, scorched black. It belonged to a wealthy guest. Word spread. Blame circled like a hawk. You offered to pay with your wages, 2 weeks' worth. You offered to press every item for the rest of the month. They refused. You thought you'd be dismissed. But the housekeeper surprised you. She's never made that mistake before, she told them. And just like that, you stayed. You think about that moment often. How close you came to losing everything over 1 second of inattention. Laundry leaves no room for humanity, only perfection. Books, the book you bought in secret. At the back of the grocer's stall, behind sacks of flour and dusty candles, sat a second-hand bookstand. You saw it on a rare afternoon errand. You stopped. You touched the cracked leather spine of a book titled On the Education of Women. You bought it, with coins saved from doing extra loads for the cook. You hide it beneath your mattress. You read it late by candlelight when no one is awake. The pages speak of possibility, of intellect, of women writing books, opening schools, changing laws. You smell like lye and smoke. Your nails are broken, but you turn each page gently like something sacred. Because for just an hour each night, your mind is allowed to be more than your body. A window into another world. There is a window in the wash house. It's small and high, meant for ventilation, but it lets in a sliver of sky. You watch it change color through the day, steel gray in the morning, golden at noon, crimson at sunset. You begin to track time by that light, not by bells or shifts, but by sun. Some days you imagine climbing through it. You imagine setting down your paddle and simply walking out into a field, bare hands, empty of work, full of freedom. But the next load is always waiting. And dreams here are best kept quiet. Candle final reflection. No museum will display a laundress's paddle. No history book will mention the woman who boiled the linens of the powerful. But her fingerprints are on every pressed collar, in every photograph of every man who shaped the century. History forgets the hands that kept it clean. But you remember, because those hands were yours. How to make a bed in 12 layers, the science of sleep in old hotels. The bed as a battlefield. It looks simple, a rectangle of cloth tucked neatly into a wooden frame. But a hotel bed in 1890 is not simple. It is a construction project, a ritual, a statement of wealth. And above all, it is a test of endurance for the maid tasked with creating it. You are that maid. You work in the Empire Grand Hotel, 4 stories of polished stone and gaslight glamour in New York City. The bellboys get tips. The cooks get praise. You get neither, but your hands are the last to touch every guest's bed before they sleep. A perfectly made bed isn't just hospitality. It's silent proof that someone labored unseen for a stranger's comfort. And that someone is you. Thread the 12 layers of sleep. Making a bed is not one action, it's a dozen. Mattress tick the base layer stuffed with horsehair or cotton. Heavy, lumpy, needs daily flipping. Mattress cover, tied or pinned over the tick to reduce dust and stains. First under blanket, woven wool, thick and scratchy. Second under blanket, optional, if the guest is wealthy or the season cold. Bottom sheet, white cotton or linen, tightly tucked using hospital corners. Top sheet, identical in size, but folded down over the blankets for appearance. First coverlet, often colored for show. Second blanket, more warmth, more bulk. Feather bed or eiderdown, a quilted layer added in winter. Fluffy, but impossible to fold alone. Bedspread decorative, hides everything underneath. Pillow S, feather stuffed, 2 for common guests, 4 for important ones. Bolster or neck roll, a final cushion to indicate elegance. Each piece must be laid in the correct order, each corner smoothed, each wrinkle removed. You do this 12, 15, sometimes 20 times a day. You are not a maid, you are an architect of sleep. Bed the weight of comfort. The tick mattress alone weighs over 50 pounds. Flipping it requires leverage, timing, and the kind of strength no one expects from a woman in a lace cap. But you do it. You always do it. Because if the master of room 402 complains of uneven support, the blame falls to you. Not the mattress maker, not the porter, not the guest's aging spine. One slip of a sheet, one lump beneath a pillow, one hair left behind, and your work is judged a failure. Perfection is the baseline. Anything less is scandal. Magnifying glass tilted left the inspection ritual. Once the bed is made, it must be inspected. First by you, then by the head maid. In larger hotels, sometimes by the floor matron herself. They check for symmetry in the sheet folds, matching pillowcases, absence of dust or hair, sharp corners at the bed base, fresh scent, lavender starch, or simple clean cotton. You've learned tricks. How to fold a top sheet into a perfect triangle. How to hold your breath while placing the final pillow so your exhale doesn't shift the blanket. Some girls rush. You never do. Because you understand, a made bed is not just for the body. It's for the mind, for the illusion of peace. And illusions in this place must be flawless. Candle a bed tells a story. You learn to read what a guest's bed reveals. A torn pillowcase, someone restless. Sheets folded halfway down, a guest who hesitated. The top blanket removed, someone used to cold. A hidden hairpin beneath the pillow, a woman who cried before sleep. You never mention what you find, but you remember. Some guests leave beds like battlefields, others like coffins. Some barely disturb the covers at all, as if even rest feels unsafe. And every morning you erase the story, you smooth it flat, you reset the stage. Sleep is a performance, and you're the one behind the curtain. Unresolved thought. When your job is to make rest for others, where do you place your own exhaustion? The labor behind luxury. The guest enters their room and sees calm. White sheets, folded corners, a faint scent of lavender or starch. The bed waits for them like an open invitation, effortless, untouched. But what they never see is how many hands, how much heat, and how many hours go into making that illusion. Because for every moment of their comfort, there are dozens of yours spent in discomfort. Basket starch, sunlight and scorch marks. Hotel sheets don't just appear white. They are boiled in lye, rinsed in cold water, starched by hand, and hung in direct sun until stiff. Starch is both blessing and curse. It gives sheets that crisp feeling, what guests call freshness. But starching is exacting work. You mix it with boiling water, ladle it over linen, then smooth the cloth with wooden paddles. If too thick, the sheets crack when folded. Too thin, and they seem limp cheap. Once dry, you press them with heavy irons heated over an open flame. There are no thermometers, only instinct. You test heat by briefly touching your hand to the iron's base. A second too long and you're burned. A second too short and the sheet stays creased. You've scorched a few, everyone has, but you've learned to press like a pianist, graceful, precise, and silently fast. Droplet the bed that nearly broke you. There was a guest once, Mr. Hadley from Baltimore, known for his expectations, known for his complaints. He sent back every sheet the first morning. Too stiff, he said. The second day, too wrinkled. The third smells like smoke. Each time you remade the bed, same linen, different starch, hung nearer the rosemary bush, pressed with a cloth between the sheet and the iron. On the fourth day, he said nothing, not a word. You took that as a victory. Not because he was pleased, but because he had no reason to complain. Sometimes, silence is the only reward you get. The tools you never had. You've heard rumors of hotels in Europe with newfangled laundry machines, of beds that fold themselves by pulley, of electric irons that regulate heat without guesswork. But not here. Here, you work with what you have. A wooden bed frame that groans if shifted wrong. A basket with splinters that tear your apron. A sliver of candle to help you finish folding in the evening. Your most valuable tool, your memory. You remember which guest wants the top sheet tucked only at the foot, which prefers 2 pillows instead of 4, which side the lady sleeps on, so you can place a lavender sachet on that side alone. They never ask how you know. They just expect it. Light bulb, the myth of Maid's magic. Some guests treat your work like magic, a vanished wrinkle, a softened sheet, a refreshed room. They leave and return and everything is clean again, as if beds self-assemble, as if linens unsoil themselves, as if comfort is natural. But you know the truth. Magic has nothing to do with it. It's sweat, strategy, and patience. It's bending over 20 beds a day with a smile if someone walks past. It's remembering that even though no one notices a perfect bed, everyone remembers a bad one. That's the curse of invisible work. If you do it well, it disappears. Unresolved thought. If the work is forgotten the moment it's touched, How does the worker remember who she is? Where no one ever slept. There's a room on the third floor, room 317. It's rarely booked, tucked into the corner near the service stairwell. The wallpaper peels slightly near the window. The mattress is older than the others. The gaslight fixture flickers. You make the bed there once a week, whether it's used or not. The sheets stay perfectly folded. The pillows remain untouched. It's a bed no one ever sleeps in. But it still has to be made. And something about that, about preparing rest that will never come, feels more familiar than it should. The end-of-day ritual. You finish your shift after dark. The bedspread on the last room is laid out. The pillows are plumped. The corners folded. You gather your tools, fold your apron, and walk the hall one last time. It's quiet. The gaslights hum. The floors creak beneath your worn shoes. Sometimes you pause at a doorway, not to admire the bed, but to make sure it looks like no one ever touched it. Because that is the point. Luxury here is measured by how little labor appears. And you are the one who must vanish behind the illusion. Envelope the note you never sent. You once wrote a letter to yourself. You don't remember why exactly. Maybe it was a hard day. Maybe you just wanted to feel like someone was listening. You wrote it on hotel stationery and hid it in the pocket of your apron. You make comfort for others, even when you have none yourself. That matters. You still have it, crumpled now, smudged with starch and sweat. But some nights, after folding the last towel and smoothing the last wrinkle, you read it again. Not because you believe it, but because no one else ever says it. Candle sleep you never get. You help others sleep. That's your job. But your own rest is restless. You lie on a thin mattress in the attic quarters, your back stiff, your fingers sore, your dreams filled with ticking clocks and wrinkled linens. Even in sleep, you imagine work waiting. Sometimes you dream of soft beds, of sleeping without having to make it first, of blankets that are not reminders of labor. Sometimes you dream of nothing at all. And sometimes that's better. Open book the story the bed never told. A guest died once, in room 204. An elderly man traveling alone, quiet, always polite. He tipped his hat to you in the hallway. On his final night, he left the bed perfectly made. When they found him in the morning, he was sitting in the chair by the window, his coat still on. They removed his body before breakfast. By noon, you were told to remake the room. Fresh sheets, new soap, no mention of what happened. You did as told. But when you folded the blanket, you paused. Because you realized this was the only bed he didn't touch. And somehow, that said more than if he had. Candle final reflection. Beds hold more than sleep. They hold stories, longing, grief, escape, comfort bought and sold in folded corners. And someone, always someone, labored to make it ready. You were that someone. You made the space where others let go of the world, even as you carried it on your back. And though they may never know your name, they rested because of you. The smell of elegance, what perfume could hide in Gilded Age inns? Scents and shadows. The Gilded Age sparkled on the surface, gowns embroidered with gold thread, chandeliers dripping with crystals, parlors perfumed with imported roses. But beneath the velvet lay dust, beneath the perfume sweat, beneath the shine rot. You work as a scent maid in the Bellevue Inn, a five-star establishment nestled on the Hudson. Your title is unofficial, but your duties are very real. To keep the hotel from smelling like what it truly is: wood, smoke, mildew, and human beings. Because in 1895, elegance wasn't just seen, it was expected to be smelled. And your job was to keep everything beautiful, especially the things that weren't. Lotion bottle the perfume cart. Your tools are not a mop or bucket, but a tray of scent bottles: rosewater, orange blossom, bergamot, lavender sachets, clove buds in muslin bags, lemon peel boiled in copper pots. You push a small cart down the hall, applying scents with a flick of the wrist. Linen closets get lavender. Drawing rooms get citrus. Smoking rooms get peppermint oil to mask the cigars. Ladies' suites are dusted with rosewater spray. You walk slowly, quietly. Guests rarely see you, but your work lingers. If someone says, "The air felt light," you've succeeded. If someone says nothing at all, you've done your job perfectly. Droplet what scent hides and what it does. You can't perfume away mold. You can't mask the stale air of a guest who never opens their windows, or the sour breath of illness, or the reek of muddy boots from a porter's careless shortcut. You try. But some days, even the most delicate rose can't compete with the smell of rotting carpet in room 206 after last week's flood. The guest doesn't notice, you do. You scrub the floor with lemon and pine oil. You open the windows. You sprinkle mint leaves under the bed. Still, it lingers. You make a note in your scent journal: mask, not cure. A rule that applies to more than smells. Fire the air before fire. One of your duties is to freshen the air before the fire is lit in each room. You arrive first. Sprinkle crushed bay leaves near the hearth. Drop orange peel on the grate and leave. The guest enters later, and the fire releases the scent into the room. They think it's the fireplace itself that smells so pleasant. They never think of you, crouched in the half-dark, arranging dried herbs with aching fingers. They never ask why the room smells like Christmas, or why their dreams are easier here. You wonder if scent can carry intention. You hope it can. Herb secrets in the sachets. You're allowed to make your own sachets. You fill muslin pouches with dried lavender, cloves, crushed mint, even salt. You place them in drawers behind curtains beneath beds. But some are not for guests. Some you hide in your own shoes, your own pillowcase. Because when your days are filled with sewage, mildew, and spilled broth, you need something beautiful too. You've hidden poems in sachets. Once, a letter from a maid to her sweetheart. Once, a coin that smelled of cinnamon. A tiny bribe from a grateful guest who didn't want anyone to know they'd requested extra sachets. Scent is a kind of intimacy, and you are its quiet guardian. Unresolved thought. If a room only smells clean because you hid its decay, Is the luxury still real? The nose that knows too much. By now, you can smell a lie. You can tell when a guest has been drinking before breakfast, when someone is hiding illness behind handkerchiefs soaked in cologne, when a room that should smell like roses instead carries a faint trace of something burnt or spoiled or sad. You walk the halls like a detective with no badge. The staff calls you nose gifted, but you know it's not a gift. It's a survival instinct. In a place where everything must be clean, elegant, and proper, you must be the first to notice what is. Wine glass when the guest smells like guilt. You remember a particular visitor, Mr. Leach from Philadelphia. He wore a lilac scent, strong and cloying, the kind that lingered long after he'd left a room. But one night when he passed you on the stairs, there was something else beneath it. Whiskey and blood, faint but sharp. Later, the chambermaid found a cracked vase and a blood-stained collar in his room. No one spoke of it. The laundry girls handled it. The sheets were burned. But you remembered the smell. And every time lilac passes your nose now, you think of him. Not all perfume masks evil. Some perfumes are the mask. Wind the rooms that refuse to stay sweet. Some rooms just don't hold fragrance. Room 114 smells like old tobacco, no matter how many lemon peels you scatter. Room 311 always feels musty, even when the windows are left open all day. You do your best. Eucalyptus hung behind the curtain. Clove oil dabbed under the radiator. Cinnamon simmered in a tea kettle. Still, some spaces resist. You think maybe rooms remember. Maybe wood and plaster hold onto what people bring into them, fear, lust, grief. Maybe you're not just scenting rooms. Maybe you're trying to overwrite ghosts. But ghosts don't surrender easily. Cleaning with scented lies. You learn tricks from other scent maids. If the closet smells damp, toss a handful of baking soda and lavender inside a boot. If the parlor reeks of dog, boil sage in the scullery and waft it in using a fan. If a guest soils the mattress, scrub with vinegar, then rose oil, and never say a word. Every solution is a combination of chemical and charm. You're not just a maid. You're part scientist, part magician. But no one sees that when they walk into a freshly scented room. They just say, "It smells nice," and close the door behind them. The woman who wrote in perfume. One day, you found a letter in the wastebasket of room 206, torn in half, but not yet stained. The paper was scented, lilac and vanilla, a perfume sold only in Paris. You pieced the letter back together in secret. It read, "If you loved me, you would not have left without a word." You don't know who wrote it. You don't know who it was meant for. But you kept it. Because sometimes the things we perfume are the very things we fear will rot if left in air too long. And maybe that's what love is. Unresolved thought. When scent becomes a shield, what happens when the mask begins to fade? What the nose remembers. It's late now. The perfume bottles have been returned to their velvet-lined case. The sachets are sealed. The fire has gone out in the drawing room, and the lemon peels that once danced in the kettle now sit curled and brown in the hearth. But the smell of the day lingers on your hands. Rose, lye, starch, and something else, something human. You wash your palms in lavender water. The scent softens but never leaves. Because even when the rooms are empty, your memory is full. Lotion bottle, the scent you made yourself. You've been working on your own blend, something simple, soft. A mixture of dried mint, orange peel, and violets. You tuck it into your apron, not for the guests. For you. When you're forced to clean a room fouled by illness or waste, you breathe through your sachet. When someone yells, you press it to your chest. When you walk home in the cold, it reminds you that something beautiful still exists in this world. No one asked you to make it. No one knows you carry it. But it's the one thing in this job that belongs only to you. And you guard it like a secret garden. Fire when the scent is too strong. Sometimes guests overdo it. They bathe in perfume so heavy it clings to curtains, seeps into upholstery, leaves oil spots on pillowcases. Rose layered over musk, layered over vanilla, layered over something you can't name. Those rooms are hardest to cleanse. Because they're not just covering odor. They're covering fear of aging, of failure, of being seen. You recognize the pattern. You've done it yourself in smaller ways. The extra spritz before your mother's funeral. The mint sachet before your first hotel interview. The clove oil to stop crying on your first week scrubbing the ladies' parlor. Perfume isn't always for others. Sometimes it's armor. Open book, the ledger of scents. You've begun keeping a journal, not just of smells, but what they mean. Lavender equals control. Cinnamon equals warmth. Rose equals hiding. Lemon pretending. Vinegar equals undoing. Each entry is a memory. The diplomat's mistress who wept into peppermint-scented gloves. The widow who requested jasmine soap because it reminded her of her husband. The chambermaid who left a clove sachet in her apron pocket the day she never returned. You write it all down. Because the room may forget, the guests will forget, but your nose doesn't. And neither will you. The mirror and the mask. There's a mirror in the service hallway. Narrow, tilted, never cleaned. You glance into it after finishing your rounds. You see a woman with her hair pinned up, eyes slightly red from smoke or sleep, apron smudged at the hem. You don't look elegant, you don't look wealthy, but you do look strong. And behind your scent, beneath the rose water, the lemon oil, the sachets of mint and lavender, you smell like you. And that is enough. Candle final reflection. In the Gilded Age, elegance was not only bought with money, it was built on silence, illusion, and scent. And somewhere beneath it all stood women like you, armed with perfume and resolve, working in the shadows to make the world feel softer than it really was. You weren't noticed, but you were felt, in every breath a guest took and every memory they couldn't name. And that was your legacy. Guest complaints and silent tears, the emotional toll of serving the elite. The smile that isn't yours. You are told to smile. When the lady complains her water is lukewarm. When the gentleman forgets your name, or worse, calls you by one that isn't yours. When the child spills ink and blames you, and the mother sighs as if you disappointed her. You are told to nod gently, to lower your eyes, to apologize for what you didn't do and offer to fix what was never broken. You are a servant in the Windsor house, a hotel for the wealthy and unkind, in the very heart of 1890s Chicago. And your smile is not yours. It is theirs. Clipboard the book of complaints. Each morning, you are handed the book. It's bound in leather and filled with complaints written in beautiful penmanship and sharp ink. The soup was tepid. The linens too coarse. The maid avoided eye contact. The hallway smelled of wood polish. I asked for fresh tulips, not lilies. You read each one before your shift. You learn what you've done wrong, even if you didn't do it. The head matron never looks at you while reading it. She just reads the line aloud, closes the book, and says, "Fix it." You nod, even though you want to scream, because you know the hallway doesn't smell like polish. It smells like your anger. Droplet when no one asks how you feel. There is no box for your emotions. No line in the guest ledger for "Maid cried at midnight," or "Waiter lost his father but still showed up on time." You are expected to serve, no matter what life does to you. Your mother died. The guest still needs her bath drawn. You haven't eaten. The dining tray still needs polishing. You were just scolded by the butler for something he did. You still need to smile. You bury feelings like dirty dishes, quietly, quickly, without leaving a mark. The guests never know. And if they did, they wouldn't care. The mirror that watches you. In the guest hall of the East Wing, there is a full-length mirror outside the ballroom. It's not meant for you, but every time you walk past, you glance. You check your apron, your face, your posture. You check to see if your sadness is visible. So far, it hasn't been. That is your success. But it doesn't feel like one. Woman's hat, the woman who complained about everything. You remember her. Mrs. Winthrop, 2 trunks of silk dresses, 1 greyhound dog that slept on velvet. She requested lemon water every morning and said "thank you" without ever looking up. One day, she complained your shoes were too loud on the stairs. So you began walking in stockings. You slipped once, cut your knee, didn't tell anyone. When she left, she tipped the bellboy, not you. And you understood something cruel. Some people expect gratitude from those they pay, but never feel compelled to give it in return. Unresolved thought. When the world demands your smile but ignores your sorrow, where do you put your grief? The apology you're always owed. You have said "I'm sorry" more times than you've said your own name. "I'm sorry, ma'am." "My apologies, sir." "I'll correct that immediately." Forgive the inconvenience. And each time it chips away at something inside you, because the apology isn't for a mistake. It's for being visible, for being human, for interrupting the fantasy that the world revolves perfectly, without labor, without bodies that tire or bleed. You apologize again and again, because the job doesn't allow for truth. Only service. Only silence. Package the complaint that changed you. There was a family from Boston once, rich, sharp, and always watching. Their daughter was kind to you at first. She asked questions. She laughed. You felt for a moment like maybe you weren't invisible. Then one morning, the head matron read aloud from the complaint ledger. The parlor maid seems overly familiar. She asked my daughter if she liked books. You hadn't realized your voice was enough to be punished. You were reassigned to the scullery for a month. Cold floors, rotten smells, no windows. You never asked another guest anything again. And you never looked at kindness the same way. Open mailbox with raised flag letters you'll never send. You write letters in your head. To guests who screamed. To the matron who never smiled. To the boy who slipped you a note and never came back. I did not deserve your anger. You forgot my name, but I never forgot your cruelty. I cleaned your child's vomit off the hallway, and you still asked why the rug looked dull. You never write these letters down, but you carry them like folded napkins in your apron. Someday you think they will turn into something else, but for now, they're the only things you own that feel honest. Magnifying glass tilted left the secret scorecard. The staff keeps an unofficial tally. 1 point if a guest says thank you. 2 points if they look you in the eye. 3 points if they ask your name. 5 points if they remember it the next day. Most weeks your score is 0. Once a child asked you your name, you told her, Eliza. She smiled, whispered it back. Later, her mother told her not to address the help. She never said it again. You erased your score, but you still remember the sound of your name and her voice. Performing arts when smiling hurts. Some guests say, smile more. They say it when you're tired, when your cheeks ache, when you've just come from scrubbing a toilet or carrying firewood up 4 flights of stairs. You smile anyway, but inside something hardens, not bitterness, not rage, just resolve. You learn to smile like a mask, like armor, and you begin to understand something that the wealthy never do. The people who smile the most are often carrying the heaviest sorrow. Unresolved thought. If your face becomes a costume and your voice a script, how long before you forget who you really are? The place where tears go. There's a room beneath the hotel kitchen. No windows, no name. Just stone walls, a broken chair, and an empty crate someone once used for potatoes. It's where staff go when they need to cry. Not loudly, never loudly. Just enough to let the pressure out. You've been there twice this week. Once after a guest accused you of stealing a brooch that was later found inside her own glove. No apology. No acknowledgement, just her silence and your shame. You sat in that cold, quiet room, your hands shaking, and thought, is this what my life is meant to be? You stood up and went back to work. Safety pinned the maid who finally spoke. Her name was Dinah. She worked in the hotel for nearly 8 years, always on time, always obedient, until one day after a guest called her girl and demanded she scrub the floor again properly, she said simply. It was already clean, sir. You just didn't see it. Gasps, the matron scolded her. The butler frowned. The guest demanded she be fired. And she was. Because no one else knew how to fold the linens like Dinah. No one else worked as quietly. After that, she never spoke to guests again. But she taught you something. Sometimes survival means choosing silence, not being forced into it. Envelope the compliment that was meant for you. Once in the laundry room, you overheard a guest speaking to the hotel manager. I always sleep better here than anywhere else. He meant it as praise. But he didn't realize that the reason was you. The way you fluffed his pillow just so. The way you placed lavender beneath his pillowcase. The way you checked twice that the window was cracked open for breeze but not draft. He never knew your name. But he slept well because of you. And somehow that has to be enough. End arrow the goodbye you never got. You leave the hotel eventually. Not in a grand way, not with thanks or flowers. You simply stop showing up. Your name fades from the assignment board. Your tasks are divided among others. A new girl wears your apron. She's told where the dust hides, how to scrub brass without streaks, which guests to avoid eye contact with. You become a shadow in the system you once upheld. But you carry your memories, the sound of your name in the mirror, the scent of lemons in the linen room, the feel of your first apology and your final refusal to smile for someone who didn't deserve it. And you walk away with something stronger than pride. You walk away with self. Candle final reflection. The elite who filled the hotel rooms with perfume and complaints will forget the names of the women who served them. But in the quiet corners of history, someone scrubbed, folded, and endured. Someone smiled through pain. Someone bore the weight of elegance with blistered hands. And in doing so, they proved that dignity is not something given by the powerful. It is something held, silently, stubbornly, by the invisible. Under the floorboards, the forgotten lives of black servants in northern hotels. Seen, heard, then forgotten. It is 1881. You are not a slave, but you are not free. You work in a northern hotel, a large, proud brick structure in upstate New York, the kind they claim is progressive. There are no chains, no overseers, but there are rules that sound an awful lot like silence, and doors you may walk through only when no one's watching. You are a black chamberman. You clean the ash from fireplaces, carry trunks up 4 flights of stairs, and sweep the halls before sunrise. You wear no name tag. Your uniform has no buttons. Because the guests don't need to know who you are. They just need you not to be there when they arrive. Scroll the rule that was written. There's no sign that says, colored staff must not be seen in parlors. But you know. You know because the head butler avoids assigning you to guest floors unless they're full. You know because the last time you were spotted by a southern guest in the hallway, he asked the manager why Negroes were being allowed to loiter. You were polishing a banister. You were told to switch shifts the next day. Not punished, just moved. That's how it always goes here. Erasure isn't loud. It's quiet, like footsteps on carpet, like a name never spoken, like history without a witness. Luggage, the labor you carry. You carry everything in this hotel. Trunks too heavy for one man. Coal buckets that scorch your palms. Chamber pots that make your stomach turn. And expectations you didn't ask for. You carry the idea that you should be grateful just to work here. That you have it good because this isn't the South. That you should nod, smile, and never speak above a whisper. But you remember what your grandmother said before she passed. Freedom ain't where you stand. It's how deep you breathe when nobody's watching. And sometimes, when you're alone in the attic rooms where guests never go, you breathe deep. And you remember who you are. The work that disappears. You clean before the day begins. That way, the guests never see you, never hear the bristles scrubbing their soiled bath, never see the soot on your sleeves from their fireplace, never smell the bleach on your hands. They wake to clean floors and call it magic. You know better. But your name is not listed on the service roster outside the manager's door. The Irish girls are listed. The French laundress is listed, but not you. When you asked why, the matron said, "It's better that way for appearances." She meant for their comfort, not yours. Broken heart the night the guest called you boy. He was drunk, red-faced, laughing loudly in the parlor after the card game. He saw you walking past and said, "Boy, get me another drink." You paused. You are 28 years old, a father, a husband. But in this place, you're not those things. You're the echo of a system they pretend is gone. You got the drink. Then back in the cellar, you sat in the dark and whispered your child's name, just to remind yourself of a world outside this one. Because no matter how hard they try to flatten you, you still carry your own story. Unresolved thought. If your name is never recorded, your face never remembered, did you still leave an imprint on the world? Names no one wrote down. Your pay stub reads only Porter. No surname, no initials, just the task. You once tried to correct the bookkeeper, told her your name was Elijah Carter. She nodded but made no changes. "Too long," she said. "There's only one of you anyway." You are not just one. You are a son, a husband, a brother, a man who once sang in a church choir in Savannah, a man whose hands built fences, carved wood, caught fish, and buried his mother. You have seen war and loss and joy. But to them, you are the mop in your hand, the coal on your shirt, the shadow that leaves when the bell rings. And the shadow does not ask to be remembered. Candle the cellar where stories live. In the far end of the wine cellar, behind the stacked crates, is a hidden space. The staff calls it the floorboard room. It is where black servants gather on break when breaks are allowed. You eat in silence. You rest with your eyes half shut. Sometimes you talk in whispers. About Mississippi. About a cousin who ran north and vanished. About the time a guest left a 10-cent tip and called it generous. And every now and then, someone reads aloud. A Bible verse, a poem, a newspaper clipping. Words to remind you that even here, even now, you are more than dust. You do not write your stories on hotel paper. You write them on each other's hearts. Because that's the only record that can't be erased. Coat the uniform that doesn't fit. Your jacket is second-hand. It belonged to another porter gone now. No one remembers his name. The sleeves are too short and the collar pinches. You patch a tear with thread bought from your wife's needle kit. The manager says, "It looks fine." You are not allowed to wear gloves. Gloves are reserved for white footmen and dining room attendants. You polish brass with bare hands until your skin cracks, then wear the cuts like quiet rebellion. Your appearance must reflect the hotel's elegance, so long as that elegance doesn't come with dignity. So you button the coat, straighten your spine, and pretend not to feel the fray. You are not the jacket. You are the one who endured inside it. Locked the room you couldn't enter. Room 402, reserved for special guests. You were never allowed to set foot inside, not even to light the fire. They said it was policy. You cleaned every other room on the floor. You heard the giggles behind the door. You heard the yelling. You heard the silence afterward. One day, the door was left open. You saw nothing extraordinary. Just velvet drapes, gold leaf mirrors, and a woman sitting by the window, her back turned. She didn't glance your way. And still, you stepped back before you were seen. Because you knew one look from her could cost you your position. And you were feeding two mouths back home. Open book, the ledger you kept in your mind. You never wrote down what you saw, but you remembered it all. The guest who lied about missing money and blamed the chambermaid. The Irish girl fired for improper conduct after turning down a guest's advances. The boy who whistled once, just once, and was beaten behind the kitchen. You kept a silent record, not for revenge, not even for justice. Just so someone would remember. Because history is often the story of those who held the pen. And you, without ink or paper, still told the truth. Unresolved thought. If your memory holds the weight of lives unacknowledged, does that make you their historian or their ghost? The history that stayed hidden. The hotel lobby gleams under gaslight. The guests glide by, their boots never touching the filth you swept away at dawn. They do not see you, not really. But your work is there, in every polished handle, every clean stare, every fire that burns just warm enough. Your fingerprints are everywhere. And yet, when the guest book is archived, when the portraits are framed, when the building's centennial is celebrated, you will not be mentioned. Because in places like this, history is a performance, and the stagehands are never applauded. Package the day you were told to leave through the back. It was after years of service, after lifting trunks, carrying coal, swallowing insults, and cleaning rooms too fine for your shoes. One day, a manager pulled you aside. There's a gathering in the front lobby. Please use the kitchen door to leave. You weren't dressed improperly. You hadn't done anything wrong. You simply didn't fit the image they wanted guests to see. So you walked through the kitchen, past the sinks, past the boiling stew, past the dish boy who nodded but didn't speak. And you stepped into the alley, not with shame, but with clarity. This building may have used your back to hold itself up, but it would never claim your name. You didn't belong to it. It belonged to you. Open book, the young boy who asked a question. He was a new hire, just 12, fresh from Georgia, still called everyone sir, even the janitor. His hands were small, too small for the coal bucket, but he worked hard. One day he looked up at you and asked, "You ever think they'll put our names in the history books?" You didn't lie. You said, "Not unless we write our own." He nodded. You don't know where he is now. Maybe he left. Maybe he stayed and became someone no one saw too. But you hope he remembers that answer. You do. Bricks, the message scratched into stone. One winter, while cleaning in the basement corridor, you found it, beneath a loose brick, scratched with the blunt edge of a coal pick. "We was here, 1864. No name, no initials, just 5 words. You stared at it for a long time. You traced it with your thumb. And then you added your own. Still here, still standing. Maybe someone will find it one day. Maybe they'll wonder. Maybe they'll know, even for a moment, that this place did not build itself. And that not all stories are told in ink. Some are carved in silence. Candle final reflection. Beneath the luxury and light of Gilded Age hotels were lives that labored in the dark, never named, never honored, often forgotten. But they were there, carrying, cleaning, enduring, not slaves, not free, somewhere in between, a space history rarely sees. And yet, through the cracks in the floorboards, through the stories passed in whispers, through the scars on their hands and the strength in their memory, they left a truth that cannot be erased. They mattered, and they always will.